Hey you, welcome back to the Game Room. As we head closer and closer to a fully digital era in gaming, preservation becomes that much more important in making sure we never lose the games or software that have come before. Today, I bring you a cautionary tale of how the origins of a retail release PlayStation game are almost on the verge of disappearing forever. Let's travel back to the year 2002. The PlayStation 2 is in full bloom, and publishers are winding down their PSX games to be finally finished and published one last time, moved to the PlayStation 2, or simply cancelled. If you were like me at the time and reserving games at your local game shop to assure you didn't miss any release, one of those games was a racing game called Freewheeling USA, available for a measly $10. Scheduled for release on February 2nd, 2002, it would offer a similar gameplay style to the Nintendo 64's Cruisin' USA released 6 years earlier. As the release date was nearing, however, the game was quietly pulled from store listings. The only proof that it was ever announced for the PlayStation, aside from this archive.org screen grab, is that the ESRB rating for it is still active on their site. Over 10 years later, while doing the research for another PlayStation game, it was discovered that Freewheeling USA did come out after all, but on the PC. Here's where the story takes a long dive into the rabbit hole I described it as on Twitter months ago. Having happily realized it was at least on one platform, another revelation was made. There is so little information about it that it's as if the game didn't exist at all. There are no reviews for it on websites, not even Metacritic. It has literally 0 entries. There are no videos of it on YouTube, none, minus me now talking about it in this episode and anyone else to follow. Even though it was published by Ubisoft, it's not available in their Steam library or their own digital store Play. In trying to Google it, the only real hits are a single website review of it from a smaller store site that hasn't been updated since 2008. I acquired my copy for the computer off of eBay, but even there, only 4 copies of it were for sale at the time. I wanted to show you footage of the game running, but I couldn't get it to run on 4 different computers, including the Windows 98 machine I use for archiving. In prepping for this episode, I actually got in touch with the developer Hoplite Research and their CEO to figure out the path this game's life took, but I wasn't able to get any questions answered in time for this episode to air. With Freewheeling USA's fate all but erased from the universe, you'll be happy to know that the game actually lives on, but in a much more cheekier format. PlayStation owners know the game as Hooters Road Trip. Here's where the game is suddenly well known, or at least infamously known, as being one of the worst game releases on the system. It's become one of the lesser known go-to punching bags for top 10 lists and YouTubers alike. Having completed the game 4 times, I can assure you it's surprisingly not that bad, and in fact, has some charm to it. In the simplest terms, Hooters Road Trip is essentially the PlayStation equivalent of a Sega CD game release. It already existed in a prior format on a different system, but now they slapped in some full motion video and extra audio and called it a new release. At the game's core is still the original Freewheeling USA driving game, but now racing well, it grants you clips of Hooters waitresses welcome you to the state you just arrived at. The loading screens are now images from the Hooters calendar or other promotional imagery they had lying around at the time. The game is laid out in an extremely simple plan that tries to emulate Gran Turismo, but not really. You have the actual road trip, free races and practice, and then the test track for licensing cars. You unlock cars based on your performance in the road trips, which includes finishing in first, and then a possible bonus for finishing in first within all the tracks of the road trip. The road trips start you out in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and will take the player to either the east or west coast, but keeping within the deep southern parts of the United States. There are 6 road trips in total, each containing 2 to 7 tracks to conquer. Races are one-way, non-looping events, so get used to seeing nothing but expressway scenery. Road Trip's first primary problem pops up here, thanks to the actual road trips having to always start in Florida. After racing the same 2 states first across 6 trips, you really don't want to ever see those roads again. Racing is standard fare. You'll start with several other cars in front of you and must pass them all to take first place. Races are generally around 2 to 3 minutes across 2-lane, 4-lane, and every so often no-lane roads. If you place in the top 3 spots, you're allowed passage to the next leg of the trip. If you want to unlock everything though, you'll need to place first every time. Here's where the second primary problem comes into light: the controls. Cars in this game have very heavy back ends or have their tires slathered in deep fryer grease. Attempting to drive using a push method on the control will only bring spinouts, donuts, and misery. Instead, you must drive with gentle taps on the control pad, like you are gently coaxing a Tetris piece into place. I know that sounds stupid, but the adjustment does wonders and also allows you to control the faster vehicle options that you'll need in the later stages and higher difficulties. That isn't to say that you're going to fail because of the controls. The opponents in the game are just as prone to disaster as you are. The rival cars will sometimes get stuck in the oncoming traffic or fail to maneuver fast enough into the open lane, allowing you precious time to leap ahead in positions. Graphically speaking, Hooters Road Trip is a weird mix of nice ideas and poor implementations. While the cars and parts of the world are polygons, the rest of the decor are all 2D scaling sprites. The tracks aren't sparse, but they aren't very diverse. After 20 or 30 seconds into a race, you'll have pretty much seen everything there is to see on said track. These same 20 seconds of decor is the majority of what you'll see for the next 2 minutes of each race. There's also the obvious use of pop-up in the distance, but in general it's not that bad. What is commendable is that the track widths vary quite nicely. As previously mentioned, the roads vary from 2-lane, 4-lane, and more, oftentimes in the same level. This allows you the chance to race on dirt, gravel, sand, and plenty of asphalt as you make your way to the next restaurant. One minor detail I like is that while simple, the rain effect changes direction with you as you make turns. Musically, the game just isn't there. 7 tracks are playable, but they sort of all sound the same. Car engines sound more like motorized scooters, and when you finally reach the next video of a Hooters waitress, the audio can be extremely low compared to the game volume since it appears the clips were not recorded with a proper boom mic or even just a microphone. It's the one part of the game that truly lives up to the reputation it's gained over the years. The game is a fairly short ride, if you'll pardon the pun. Once you unlock one of the faster cars like the Kuva, you can breeze by opponents on a regular difficulty setting. You'll be able to play through the whole game in a single evening, about 2 hours with or without unlocking extra cars. If you are looking to try it out, I can offer these 2 gaming tips. First, several tracks have shoulders, but the computer-controlled opponents don't use them. Take advantage of this when there's traffic in both lanes since you'll force the opponent to wait to pass the actual in-game traffic. Second, they really like driving down the center divider line or in 4-lane highways the inside lines. If you drive down the center line, you'll force opponents to stay behind you since they won't know how to get around you. Before closing out with the final review, there's also a small detail that I found rather amusing, and it shows Hoplite Research knew their core audience for the game. The loading screens all feature imagery of Hooters models, but if you look closely, the words "now loading" are always either next to or over their breasts or lower regions. I know pushing the brand's ideals are key, but that's a little too cheeky. Hooters Road Trip really isn't a bad game, it's just not a great one. Sound issues aside, once you figure out the controls, it becomes a somewhat guilty, enjoyable pleasure. I've beaten the entire game 4 times, and I could see myself returning to it again for humor's sake, or a nice little Cruising USA action on the PSX, since I don't have an N64 anymore. On Game-Rave's review scale, it merits an average 5 out of 10. The graphics are decent, but you'll notice the pop-up. The controls are decent, but once you figure them out, the game's a breeze. There are cars to unlock, but really, you only need 2 at most. For a game so featured on Hooters, you'll spend most of the time focused on the butts. Take care, guys. I'll see you next episode.